increased gun violence across the city of Gainesville, police officers are encouraging residents to turn in their guns. TV20's Kayla Lewis tells us how many they collected during this morning's buyback event.
The event was scheduled to start at 10 a.m., but according to GPD officials, cars started showing up at 9 and they sold out of all their incentives before noon. They collected a total of 46 guns, with 2 being homemade.
We always encourage our community members to use the resources available to them.
Gift cards were given out in $100 increments based on the type of firearm turned in. A total of $6,000 in gift cards were given out to people. Since this event was about turning in firearms anonymously with no questions asked, GPD officials asked us not to film any cars or people who stopped by.
Unwanted firearms that are not wanted by their owners anymore. This gives the community members an option to turn those guns in as opposed to having them sit in their closet or be used in a crime if their house were ever broken into or their car was broken into.
The buyback event was held in light of increased gun violence throughout Gainesville. Most recently, 13-year-old Kamani Hill was indicted and charged as an adult for first-degree murder after shooting and killing a man at the Tiger Bay Apartments. Meanwhile, Gainesville city leaders continue to implement their new strategy, Impact Gainesville, to reduce gun violence. The initiative will connect neighbors experiencing needs with city and community resources. The Gun Violence Intervention Program Manager, Brittany Coleman, says they want to improve access to mental health, social services, and analyze gun violence data. With the turnout of the gun buyback event blowing their expectations out of the water, GPD hopes to hold another one of these events in the future. In Gainesville, Kayla Lewis, TV 20 News.